The hall was filled with soft music, low laughter, and the sound of glasses touching. It was one of those charity nights where everything looked perfect on the surface. Bright lights hung from the ceiling. Long tables were covered with white cloths. People wore expensive suits and dresses, smiling easily, talking about business, travel, and success. For most of them, this night was more about being seen than helping anyone. At the center of it all stood the CEO. He was tall, confident, and used to attention. People listened when he spoke and laughed when he joked. He had built a powerful company from nothing, and everyone knew his story. To many, he was a symbol of success. To himself, this event was just another obligation on a busy calendar. Near the far end of the hall stood a grand piano. It was polished, black, and untouched for most of the evening. It was placed there more for decoration than use. The hired pianist had cancelled earlier that day, but no one cared much. Music was not the main reason people had come. Not far from the piano, a boy stood quietly near the wall. He looked out of place. His clothes were clean but old, a little too big in some places and too small in others. His shoes had worn soles. He kept his hands close to his body, as if trying not to take up space. No one had invited him directly. He had slipped in during the busy check-in, unnoticed. The boy's eyes kept moving back to the piano. He was not staring boldly. Instead, he glanced at it the way someone looks at something they miss deeply. Every few seconds, his fingers moved slightly, pressing against the air, as if touching invisible keys. Across the room, the CEO was talking with a group of guests. Someone noticed the boy and pointed him out, half amused, half annoyed. "Where did that kid come from?" one person whispered. The CEO followed the gesture and saw the boy. He raised an eyebrow, then smiled. In a loud, playful voice meant to entertain, he said, "What, is he here to play the piano for us?" A few people laughed. Then, without much thought, he added, "If he can actually play, maybe I'll adopt him." He chuckled as he said it, lifting his glass slightly. The laughter grew louder. It was the kind of laughter that came easily and meant nothing. To them, it was a joke, something to fill the silence before the next drink or conversation. But the boy heard every word. He did not smile. He did not laugh. He only lowered his eyes for a moment. The joke did not hurt him in the way insults usually did. He was used to those. Instead, it landed heavily, like a stone dropped into still water. He had heard people joke about his life before, about being poor, about being alone, about not belonging anywhere. Most of the time, he learned to let those words pass through him. Still, something about this moment felt different. The piano was so close now. The distance between him and it felt shorter than it really was. The noise of the room faded slightly as he focused on it. He could almost hear the sound it would make if someone touched the keys. The CEO turned back to his guests, already forgetting what he had said. For him, the boy was no longer important. The joke had served its purpose. The boy stayed where he was for a few seconds longer. His heart beat faster, not from fear, but from memory. He remembered another piano, long ago. It had not been shiny or grand. Some keys did not work. Others stuck when pressed too hard. But to him, it had been everything. He remembered sitting beside someone late at night, listening to soft notes fill a small room. He remembered being told that music could speak when words failed, that it could carry pain, hope, and love all at once. A server passed by and glanced at the boy with mild concern. "Are you lost?" she asked quietly. The boy shook his head. "No," he said. His voice was soft but steady. She hesitated, then moved on, distracted by another guest calling for her attention. The boy took a small step forward, then another. Each step felt heavy, as if the floor itself was asking him to stop. He was aware of the eyes around him now, curious, suspicious, amused. Someone whispered, "What is he doing?" Another said, "Security should handle this." The boy stopped near the piano bench. He did not sit yet. He placed one hand lightly on the edge of the piano. It felt cool and smooth under his fingers. For a moment, he closed his eyes. The room grew quieter, not because anyone meant it to, but because curiosity had replaced conversation. The CEO noticed the change in sound and turned again. He saw the boy standing by the piano and frowned slightly. "What's this now?" he said, half smiling, half confused. No one answered. The boy opened his eyes and looked at the keys. He did not look at the CEO. He did not look at the crowd. He only looked at the piano, as if it were an old friend he had not seen in a long time. He sat down slowly. The bench creaked under his weight. That small sound echoed louder than expected in the quiet hall. A few people laughed nervously. Others shifted in their seats. Someone near the back raised a phone, ready to record, expecting embarrassment or chaos. The CEO crossed his arms, still relaxed, still certain that this would be over in seconds. To him, this was just an interruption. Another strange moment in a long night. The boy lifted his hands and held them above the keys. They trembled slightly, not because he was unsure, but because it had been a long time since he had touched a real piano. He took a slow breath just before his fingers touched the keys. He hesitated. For a brief second, doubt passed through him. He thought about being told to leave, about being laughed at again, about confirming what people already believed about him. Then he pressed the first key. The sound was soft, almost fragile. It floated into the room and hung there, unexpected. A second note followed, then a third. The melody did not rush. It moved carefully, like someone walking through memories. The laughter stopped. Glasses were lowered. Conversations ended mid-sentence. Even the CEO's smile faded, replaced by something else he did not yet understand. The boy kept playing, unaware of the change around him. His world had narrowed to the keys beneath his fingers. The music carried something real, something no one in that room had planned for. And just like that, a careless joke turned into a moment no one would forget. The first notes drifted through the hall like a quiet breath. They were not loud or showy. They did not try to impress. They simply existed, soft and steady, carrying a feeling that could not be explained easily. For a moment, people were unsure how to react. Some expected the boy to stop after a few seconds. Others waited for a mistake. But the mistake never came. The boy's fingers moved with care, not rushing, not shaking anymore. Each note flowed into the next, forming a melody that felt personal, almost private. It was the kind of music that sounded like a story being told without words. A woman near the front slowly lowered her glass onto the table. The sound of it touching the surface felt too loud. A man beside her cleared his throat, then stopped, as if worried even that small noise might break something fragile. The CEO stood still. His arms, once crossed loosely, dropped to his sides. His confident posture softened without him noticing. He leaned slightly forward, his eyes fixed on the boy. He had heard many pianists before. Famous ones, skilled ones, people who played perfectly, following every rule. But this was different. This was not about being perfect. It was about feeling. The boy did not look up. His eyes were focused on the keys, but his mind was somewhere else entirely. Each note pulled him deeper into memories he rarely allowed himself to touch. He remembered cold mornings in crowded rooms, thin blankets, loud voices, doors opening and closing. He remembered being moved from one place to another, never long enough to call anywhere home. And through all of that, there had been music. He remembered sitting on the floor, listening as someone played softly late at night. He remembered being told to listen carefully, not just with his ears, but with his heart. Music understands things people don't. He had once been told. The melody grew slightly stronger now, not louder, but fuller. The boy's shoulders relaxed as his confidence settled in. The piano responded to his touch as if it recognized him. Across the room, a few guests exchanged looks. This was no longer funny, no longer uncomfortable in an amusing way. Something serious was happening, and they could feel it. Someone near the back quietly lowered their phone. Recording no longer felt right. The CEO swallowed hard. A strange tightness formed in his chest. He told himself it was nothing, just music, just a kid who happened to have talent. Still, he could not explain why his thoughts had drifted so far from the room. The melody shifted. It took on a familiar shape. His breath caught slightly. He had heard this before, not here, not like this, but somewhere else, somewhere long buried. The boy played on, unaware of the effect he was having. His fingers pressed the keys with more emotion now, the sound rising and falling like waves. The music carried sadness, but also warmth, loss, but also hope. A server stood frozen near the wall, tray balanced in her hands, forgotten. She blinked rapidly, unsure why her eyes suddenly felt heavy. The CEO's thoughts raced. A memory surfaced without warning. A small apartment, a window open to the night air, someone sitting at a worn piano, playing this very tune, smiling softly. He shifted his weight, disturbed by the memory. He had not thought of that time in years. He had chosen not to. The boy's hands moved faster for a moment, then slowed again. The music seemed to breathe, rising and falling naturally. There was no rush to finish, no need for approval. In the silence between notes, the room felt suspended, as if time itself had slowed to listen. A man near the front wiped his eyes discreetly and looked around, embarrassed, hoping no one had noticed. Others felt the same pull but did not understand it. The CEO took a step forward without realizing it. His polished shoes made a soft sound against the floor. But the boy did not look up. The melody reached a gentle peak, then softened again, like a goodbye whispered instead of spoken aloud. The CEO's heart pounded. The memory was clear now. Too clear. He remembered standing in a doorway years ago, listening to that same tune. He remembered promises made and broken, choices that felt necessary at the time, choices he had convinced himself were right. The boy at the piano had no idea that each note was peeling away layers the CEO had spent years building around himself. A guest leaned toward another and whispered, "Who is this kid?" The others shook their heads slowly. "I don't know," they said, "but this doesn't feel like a joke anymore." The CEO finally realized his mouth was slightly open. He closed it and drew in a careful breath. His confident smile was gone now, replaced by something closer to disbelief. The boy's playing grew quieter. The notes thinned, becoming delicate, almost fragile. It felt like the end of a story, one that did not want to end but knew it had to. The final note lingered in the air long after his fingers lifted from the keys. No one moved. No one clapped. The silence was complete, heavy, and full. The boy let his hands rest in his lap. His chest rose and fell slowly as he caught his breath. Only then did he lift his head. He looked around the room, suddenly aware of all the eyes on him. The weight of the moment pressed down on him, and doubt returned in a rush. He wondered if he had done something wrong. Had he crossed a line? The CEO stared back at him, eyes fixed, face pale. The boy noticed the man now, really noticed him, and remembered the joke, the laughter, the words spoken so easily. For a second, fear flashed across the boy's face. He stood up quickly, pushing the bench back a little too hard. It scraped softly against the floor. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice low but clear. "I didn't mean to cause trouble." He took a small step back from the piano, ready to leave. That was when the room finally breathed again. A single clap echoed through the hall. Then another, then many more. The sound grew, filling the space, washing over the boy like a sudden wave. He froze, unsure how to react. The CEO did not clap at first. He stood completely still, staring at the boy as if seeing him for the first time. And deep inside, a question formed, one that would not go away. "Where did you learn to play like that? And why does it feel like I already know the answer?" The applause continued, steady and strong, filling the hall with a sound very different from laughter. It was not polite clapping meant to be brief. It carried weight, respect, and something close to gratitude. The boy stood frozen near the piano, unsure whether to bow, leave, or say something. He had never been in a place like this before, and he did not know the rules. Slowly, the clapping began to fade. People lowered their hands, but their eyes stayed on the boy. The silence that followed felt different now. It was warmer, less heavy, but still serious. The CEO finally moved. He took another step forward, then another, stopping a few feet from the piano. The confident walk he usually had was gone. His steps were careful, almost hesitant. "You didn't cause trouble," he said. His voice sounded calmer than he felt. That was unexpected. The boy nodded, unsure what to say. He kept his hands by his sides, fingers still tingling from the keys. "Where did you learn to play like that?" the CEO asked. The question was simple, but it made the boy uncomfortable. He shifted his weight slightly. "I learned a long time ago," he said, "from someone who cared about music a lot." The CEO noticed the way the boy avoided details. He did not push further, though the curiosity inside him grew stronger. A few guests began whispering again, but the tone had changed. There was no amusement now, only interest. One of the event organizers approached, clearly nervous. "Sir," she said to the CEO, "should we call security?" The CEO looked at her, surprised. "Why would we do that?" "Well, he's not on the guest list," she said carefully. "He's fine," the CEO replied, without looking away from the boy. "Let him stay." The organizer nodded and stepped back, relieved but confused. The boy's shoulders relaxed slightly. He had expected to be asked to leave. Being allowed to stay felt strange. The CEO glanced at the piano, then back at the boy. "Do you play often?" he asked. The boy shook his head. "Not anymore." "Why not?" "There isn't usually a piano around," the boy said simply. The honesty of the answer landed harder than the CEO expected. He looked around the hall, filled with wealth and comfort, and suddenly it all felt excessive. A chair scraped softly as someone shifted. A server moved again, careful not to draw attention. Life in the room slowly resumed, but nothing felt the same. The CEO gestured toward a quieter corner of the hall. "Would you like something to drink? Water?" The boy hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, thank you." They walked together, side by side. People stepped aside to make room. The boy felt dozens of eyes on him, but none of them felt mocking now. Still, he kept his gaze low. They stopped near a small table. The CEO handed the boy a glass of water. "Thank you," the boy said, taking a careful sip. The CEO studied him quietly. The boy was thin, but not weak. There was a calm strength in the way he stood, something steady beneath the surface. "How did you end up here tonight?" the CEO asked. The boy thought for a moment. "I was nearby," he said. "I heard music earlier. I followed the sound." The CEO frowned slightly. There had been no music earlier, not live, but he let the detail pass. "Do you have family?" he asked, then immediately regretted the question. The boy's grip on the glass tightened. "No," he said quietly. The CEO nodded slowly. "I see." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The noise of the room filled the space between them, but it felt distant. The CEO cleared his throat. "That song you played," he said. "Where did it come from?" The boy looked up briefly, surprised. "It was taught to me," he said. "I don't know where it came from originally." The CEO's chest tightened again. He recognized the answer for what it was. The song had been passed down, not learned from a book or class, across the hall. Someone announced that dinner would begin soon. People began moving toward their tables. "You should sit," the CEO said. "Eat something." The boy hesitated. "I don't have a seat." The CEO waved a hand. "You'll sit with me." The words surprised both of them. They took their places at a table near the front. The boy sat carefully, unsure how to act. He watched others for cues, copying small movements so he would not stand out. As plates were placed in front of them, the boy's eyes widened slightly. He had not eaten a meal like this in a long time. He waited until others began before touching his food. The CEO noticed and felt a quiet discomfort settle in his stomach. As they ate, conversation slowly returned around them. People tried to act normal, but the boy remained the quiet center of attention. "Do you go to school?" the CEO asked. "Yes," the boy said. "When I can." "When you can." The boy nodded. "Sometimes I have to move. It makes things hard." The CEO set his fork down. "Who do you live with?" The boy took a breath. "Different places," he said. "It depends." The answer said more than a long explanation ever could. The CEO leaned back slightly, his mind racing. Pieces were starting to connect, though he did not yet see the full picture. "You're very brave," he said without thinking. The boy looked confused. "I don't feel brave," he said. "I just do what I have to." The CEO nodded. He understood that feeling more than he wanted to admit. The rest of the meal passed quietly. The boy ate slowly, carefully, grateful but restrained. The CEO found himself watching the boy more than his plate. When dessert arrived, the boy smiled for the first time. It was small and quick, but real. Afterward, the CEO stood. "Come with me," he said. The boy followed, unsure where they were going. They stopped near the piano again. The hall was emptier now, quieter. "You know," the CEO said slowly, "I made a joke earlier." The boy nodded. "I know, I shouldn't have," the CEO continued. "It was careless." The boy shrugged lightly. "People joke," he said. "It's okay." But it wasn't okay. The CEO knew that now. He looked at the piano, then back at the boy. "Sometimes," he said, "life gives us moments we don't expect. And sometimes those moments are trying to tell us something." The boy listened quietly. "I don't know what will happen next," the CEO said honestly, "but I'd like to help you, if you'll let me." The boy's eyes widened slightly. "Why?" The CEO paused. He searched for an answer that felt true. "Because," he said finally, "you reminded me of something I forgot." The boy did not fully understand, but he felt the sincerity in the words. He nodded once, and in that quiet moment, both of their lives began to shift, though neither of them knew just how much yet. The hall slowly emptied as the night came to an end. Chairs were pushed in, lights were dimmed, and the sound of people saying their goodbyes faded into the background. What had started as an ordinary charity event had turned into something none of the guests would forget. Still, most of them left believing they had witnessed a rare moment and nothing more. For the CEO, the night was far from over. He walked beside the boy toward a quieter hallway away from the main room. The boy followed calmly, though his heart was beating faster. He did not know what to expect. Help had been offered before in small ways, but it usually came with limits and conditions. They stopped near a large window that looked out over the city. Lights stretched endlessly into the distance. The boy stared at them, fascinated. "Do you have somewhere to go tonight?" the CEO asked. The boy hesitated. "Yes," he said. "I'll figure it out." The CEO knew that answer meant no. "Where are you staying these days?" he asked gently. "Different places," the boy replied again. "Sometimes shelters, sometimes friends of friends." The words were calm, but the truth behind them was heavy. The CEO nodded slowly. "Would you be willing to talk to someone tomorrow? A counselor, someone who can help make things more stable for you." The boy looked uncertain. "Will I have to stop playing music?" he asked. The question caught the CEO off guard. "No," he said quickly. "Of course not." The boy relaxed slightly. "Then okay." A car waited outside the building. The CEO opened the door and gestured for the boy to get in. The boy paused. "I don't want to be a problem," he said quietly. "You're not," the CEO replied. "Not even close." They rode in silence for a while. The city passed by in a blur of light and shadow. The boy watched carefully, taking everything in. He had never ridden in a car like this before. The CEO's thoughts, however, were loud and restless. The melody from earlier kept replaying in his mind. The more he thought about it, the clearer the memory became. He could see the room, feel the air, remember the sound of laughter mixed with music. It was impossible to ignore now. When they arrived at a quiet apartment building, the boy looked confused. "Are we stopping here?" he asked. "Yes," the CEO said. "Just for tonight. You'll have a place to rest." Inside, the apartment was clean and simple, though far nicer than anything the boy was used to. He stepped in carefully, as if afraid he might break something just by being there. "You can sleep here," the CEO said, pointing to a small guest room. "There are clean clothes in the closet." "Thank you," the boy said. His voice was steady, but his eyes showed disbelief. Later, after the boy had settled in, the CEO sat alone in the living room. The city lights shone through the window, but he barely noticed them. He picked up his phone and hesitated, then finally made a call. "I need information," he said when the line connected. "From a long time ago." The next day came slowly. The boy woke early, as he always did. He sat on the edge of the bed, listening to the quiet. There were no loud voices, no sudden movements. It felt strange. He wandered into the living room, where the CEO was already awake, staring at papers spread across the table. "Did I do something wrong?" the boy asked softly. "No," the CEO said quickly. "Not at all." He looked at the boy, really looked at him, and felt a deep pull he could no longer deny. "Do you know much about your mother?" he asked carefully. The boy stiffened. "A little," he said. "Not much." "What do you know?" "She loved music," the boy said after a pause. "She played the piano. She used to say music was the only thing that never leaves you." The CEO closed his eyes briefly. "Did she ever talk about me?" he asked, his voice low. The boy looked confused. "About you?" "Yes," the CEO said. "About someone she once knew." The boy shook his head. "She didn't talk much about the past. Just said some people leave before they're ready to stay." The words hit the CEO harder than any accusation could have. He took a deep breath. "There's something you should know," he said. "But I need to be sure first." The boy nodded, sensing the seriousness. Later that day, they visited a small office. The boy sat quietly while the CEO spoke with professionals, filling out forms and answering questions. None of it made much sense to him, but he trusted the calm in the CEO's voice. That evening, they returned to the apartment. The CEO looked exhausted. "Come sit," he said. They sat across from each other. "I've been searching my past," the CEO began, "trying to understand something I should have faced years ago." The boy listened, his hands folded tightly in his lap. "A long time ago," the CEO continued, "I loved someone deeply. She was kind, strong, she played the piano just like you do." The boy's eyes widened slightly. "I was young," the CEO said, "focused on success. I thought I had time. I thought leaving was temporary." His voice cracked. "I didn't come back." The room fell silent. The boy swallowed. "Are you saying?" "I don't know yet," the CEO said quickly. "But the song you played, the way you played it, the things you said." He shook his head. "They're too familiar to ignore." The boy's breathing quickened. Fear and hope twisted together in his chest. "I don't want to believe something that isn't true," the CEO said. "That's why we're being careful." The boy nodded slowly. "I understand." That night, the boy lay awake, staring at the ceiling. His life had taught him not to expect too much. Still, A small part of him wondered what it would mean to belong somewhere. In the living room, the CEO sat alone again, holding an old photograph he had finally found. It showed a younger version of himself beside a woman at a piano. He traced the edge of the photo with trembling fingers. "If I was wrong," he whispered, "I'll spend the rest of my life making it right." Outside, the city slept, unaware that two broken pots were slowly finding their way back to each other. Morning light filled the apartment softly. The boy sat at the small table, staring at a bowl of cereal that had gone untouched. His thoughts were loud, crowded with questions he did not know how to ask. The night before had left him restless. Hope felt dangerous, but it was there. In the other room, the CEO stood by the window, holding his phone. The call had ended minutes ago, yet he had not moved. His reflection in the glass looked older than he remembered, not because of time, but because of truth. He turned slowly and walked toward the boy. "Can we talk?" he asked. The boy nodded at once and stood up, though his knees felt weak. They sat facing each other. For a moment, neither spoke. The room felt too quiet. "I've spent the last few days confirming things," the CEO began. "I didn't want to rush. I needed to be certain." The boy's hands tightened together. He kept his eyes on the table. "The woman who taught you that song," the CEO continued. "The one who loved music more than anything. She and I shared a part of our lives once." The boy looked up slowly. "She was honest with me in ways no one else ever was," the CEO said. "And I failed her. I left when I shouldn't have." The room felt heavy. "There is no easy way to say this," he went on, "but everything points to the same truth." He met the boy's eyes. "I am your father." The words did not land all at once. They moved slowly, like a wave reaching the shore. The boy felt his chest tighten, then loosen, then tighten again. His breath came uneven. For a long moment, he said nothing. "I don't understand," he finally whispered. "Why now?" The CEO swallowed. "Because I didn't deserve to know you then," he said honestly, "and because life gave me a second chance in a way I never expected." The boy's eyes filled, but he did not cry. "She never told me," he said. "I know," the CEO replied. "That was her choice, and I respect it." Silence stretched between them. It was not empty. It was full of years, loss, and unanswered questions. "I don't want anything from you," the boy said suddenly. "I just want to play music. I just want to be okay." The CEO leaned forward. "I'm not here to take anything from you," he said. "I'm here to give what I should have given long ago. Safety, support, time." The boy searched his face, looking for signs of doubt or lies. He found none. "What happens now?" the boy asked. "Now," the CEO said, "we take things slowly. Your life doesn't change overnight unless you want it to." The boy nodded. That felt fair. Days turned into weeks. The boy moved into a quiet home filled with light and space. For the first time, he had a room that was his alone. On the first day, he sat on the bed and listened to the silence, unsure whether to trust it. A piano arrived one afternoon. It was not grand or flashy. It was simple, well cared for, and placed near a window. The boy touched the keys gently, afraid the sound might disappear if he pressed too hard. It did in single quotes. Music filled the room, steady and warm. The CEO listened from the hallway, his eyes closed. Each note felt like forgiveness he had not earned, but was grateful to receive. They began to learn each other in small ways. Morning routines, shared meals, quiet evenings. Nothing was forced. Nothing was rushed. The boy went back to school full-time. It wasn't easy. He had gaps to fill, things to catch up on, but he tried. And that was enough. Music lessons followed, not to turn him into a performer, but to support what already lived inside him. The boy practiced daily, not because he was told to, but because he wanted to. One evening, they sat together after dinner. "I remember the joke you made," the boy said suddenly. The CEO nodded. "I think about it every day." "I'm glad you said it," the boy added. The CEO looked surprised. "If you hadn't," the boy continued, "I might not have played. And you might not have listened." The CEO exhaled slowly. "That joke changed my life," he said. "But I'll spend the rest of it proving I'm not that man anymore." Months passed. The boy grew taller, stronger, more confident. His smile came easier now. One afternoon, the CEO attended a small school event. The boy sat at a piano on a simple stage. The room was modest, filled with parents and teachers. When the boy began to play, the CEO felt the same stillness he had felt that first night. But this time, there was no pain in it, only pride. After the applause, the boy walked straight to him. "Did I do okay?" he asked. "You did more than okay," the CEO replied, pulling him into a careful embrace. The boy hesitated, then hugged back. That night, they sat together, listening to the quiet. I don't need everything to be perfect, the boy said. I just don't want to be alone anymore. You won't be, the CEO said. Not again. The adoption process took time. Paperwork, meetings, waiting. But one afternoon, the final approval came. The boy held the letter with shaking hands. It felt unreal. This means I belong? He asked. Yes, the CEO said softly. It means you always did. That evening, the boy played the same song that had started everything. But this time, it sounded different, lighter, hopeful. The CEO listened, tears falling freely. A joke meant for laughter had become a promise kept. And in a quiet room filled with music, a broken past finally found its way home.